Hare Krishna, Namaste.
Chapter 13 is entitled as Kshetrajna Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Vibhaga Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga. Sloka 14. Sarvataḥ pāṇi-pādaṁ tat sarvato kṣi-śiro-mukham sarvata śrutimal loke sarvam āvṛtya tiṣṭhati. In the previous verse, we learnt about tattvatraya, the three realities, achetana, chetana and Ishvara. Achetana or the non-sentient beings, Chetana or the sentient being, and Ishvara is the Supreme Lord who controls both Chetana and Achetana. Now, within Chetana, we need to learn that there are further classifications. The classifications are 3 in number: Baddhatma, Muktatma, Nityatma. Baddhatma are the conditioned souls, Muktatmas are the liberated souls, Nityatmas are eternally liberated souls. Sometimes we may hear these classifications with different terms like Nitya Baddha, Nitya Siddha, Nitya Mukta. Likewise, Baddhatma, the conditioned souls, are those who are entangled in this material world due to their unexhausted karmas, who goes through many repeated birth and death with various material bodies, sometimes as Devata, sometimes as Manushya, sometimes as Pakshis, sometimes as Thavara. When the Baddhatma under the cause, it is called Asat, and when it's under the effect, it is called Sat. This we learned from the previous session, Sloka. Whereas the second classification of Chetana, which are called as Muktatma, the liberated soul, are the ones who have exhausted their karmas, meaning free from sins and merits, and who have attained the spiritual realm. For the liberated souls, Muktatmas, there is neither Karana nor Karya. That is, no cause, no effect, because they don't have to go into the Pralaya and Srishti, destruction and creation. And the third classification of Chetanas are called Nityatmas. They are the ones who are eternally situated in the spiritual world and has no connection to this material world. They are different from the liberated souls. They are not the Muktatma we just saw, because the liberated souls were at one point had karmas and were in this material world going through the same struggle like the conditioned soul, Baddhatma. And later, by realization, by proper association, and through the proper process of bhakti, they have attained the spiritual world, never to return back into the material world. Whereas the Nityatma, it was not like they were also at one point in the material world and they returned back. They never had any relationship to the material world. They never had any karmas. They got that eternal position to be Nityatma by the grace of the Lord. Which means Sat Asat does not apply to Nityatmas as well. Then coming to Ishvara. Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Controller. He is never touched by karma, though he appears in this world at times. He is not affected by the modes of material nature. He does not accumulate karma. He is the controller of these Chetanas, the Baddhatma, Muktatma and Nityatma. The Supreme Lord is also beyond the cause and effect of this material world, meaning he is not affected by the creation and destruction. Now let's keep these classifications in our mind as we enter into today's sloka and the following next few slokas. Sarvataḥ, everywhere, pāṇi, hands, pādam, legs, tat, that, sarvataḥ, everywhere, kṣi, eyes, śirah, heads, mukham, faces, sarvataḥ, everywhere, śrutimal, having ears, loke, in the world, sarvam, everything, āvṛtya, covering, tiṣṭhati, exists. Translation: everywhere or is hands and legs, is eyes, heads and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the Supersoul exists pervading everything. The Baddhatmas, the conditioned soul, are minute, anu. They are not vibhu. Likewise, the Muktatma as well. The Nityatmas also anu. None of these three classification are vibhu. They are all anu. They are all minute by nature. Whereas Ishvara is vibhu, is all pervading by nature. But we did learn in the 13th sloka part 3 that these atmas, jivatmas, to club every atma together, they are jivatmas. They have consciousness, the knowledge, which is vibhu. But due to the conditioned state, the knowledge, the consciousness is very much restricted for the Baddhatma. But when the Jivatma attains liberation, their knowledge is not restricted, they pervade. Therefore, in that sense, the Muktatmas are called Vibhu as well, but not by the Swarupa, by their nature, but by their quality of knowledge which can extend. And the same applies to Nityatmas as well. But when it comes to the Supreme Lord, Ishvara, it is not that the Lord is situated in one place and his knowledge is spread everywhere. Rather, the Lord himself is pervaded everywhere. Therefore, by nature he is vibhu, unlike the Jivatma, where by nature they are not vibhu, they are anu. That means the Baddhatma, the conditioned soul, cannot have his hands, legs, eyes everywhere. That is not possible. They are restricted to a certain capacity, how much they can extend their senses. That is due to their karma. Therefore, they can't know everything. Their knowledge is also blocked, and their knowledge and their accessibility through their senses are all restricted by time and place. That is, the Baddhatma can be in only one place, cannot be in multiple places at the same time. Of course, there are great yogis who can change body or extend themselves into multiple bodies. This happens through their austerity practices, by which they have reduced their karma and extended their consciousness. One of the examples we saw in the past was Saubhari Muni, who was able to extend himself into 50 bodies. Primarily, he is situated in one body, but he was able to extend his consciousness into additional 49 bodies. Not that the Atma is divided into 50 and placed into each and every body. Is the consciousness, the knowledge of the Atma is extended into 50 bodies. Therefore, he was able to do multiple things at the same time. But this is not usual cases where we can easily find in the history or even now. Therefore, the Baddhatma, the individual soul, having become conditioned by material nature, are not supreme. Whereas the Supreme Lord is different from the individual soul. The Supreme Lord can extend his hands without limit. At the same time, he can be in multiple places. He doesn't go through like how the Saubhari Muni has extended his consciousness into 50. That's not the way the Lord does. He, by nature, Swarupa, is pervaded everywhere. Not just like how Saubhari Muni extended by consciousness or knowledge. That's not how the Supreme Lord does. He himself is present by his Swarupa, by his nature, everywhere. And this is not possible for the Baddhatmas. The individual soul who are conditioned cannot claim that they are pervaded everywhere. They have their hands, legs, ears, eyes everywhere. That is not possible for the conditioned souls due to their karma. Now let's understand what the sloka really trying to say here. It says that everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces and ears. Well, what it means here is whatever one can do by their hands, the Supreme Lord can do things without the hands. Whatever one can do with their legs, the Supreme Lord can do without the leg. Whatever one can do with the eyes, the Supreme Lord can do without the eyes, and so forth. In the Svetveswara Upanishad, it is said, apāṇi-pādo javano grahita pashyati achakshuhu sa shrunoti akaranaha. He doesn't have leg, but he walks. He doesn't have hands, but he lifts everything. He doesn't have eyes, but he sees everything. He doesn't have ears, but he hears everything. In another sense, he doesn't need the hands, legs, eyes, ears, any of these faculties to perform their respective activities, like how a baddhatma needs it to do any of these activities. Without these faculties, the Supreme Lord can perform the activities without any hindrance. Whereas a conditioned soul cannot walk without leg, cannot lift without hands, cannot see without the eyes, cannot hear without the ears. Therefore, for the conditioned soul, for it to perform certain activities, they are completely dependent on these senses, sense objects. Otherwise, they will not able to function. They need the senses, sense objects, and the body. Whereas the Supreme Lord, He doesn't need any of these things to perform. Number one, He is pervaded everywhere. Number two, He does everything through just by His sankalpa, His will. Therefore, the sloka says, His hands are everywhere, His legs are everywhere, His eyes, heads, and faces, ears are everywhere. Meaning, whatever the hands can perform, by being everywhere, it can be performed. Whatever a legs can perform, by being everywhere, that can be performed. Likewise, the eyes, heads, faces, and ears. Sarvataḥ pāṇi-pādaṁ tat sarvato kṣi-śiro-mukham sarvata śrutimal loke sarvam āvṛtya tiṣṭhati.
Namaste. Hare Krishna.